And we are live. Hi, everyone. It's Rochie, and it's Thursday night here in the East Coast. And good morning, Manila. It's 9 o'clock in the morning there. So, good morning back there. Hi to our friends in California as well. I know you're on your way back home. So, enjoy. We have another interesting episode tonight. And of course, I wouldn't you know what, for me, when I thought about this episode, I cannot end the end of March. I would say not March, May. I cannot end the month of May without inviting this friend of mine because she's an amazing advocate for celiac disease. She is a wonderful speaker and one of the OGs in the gluten-free community. Oh, she started laughing, right? Yeah, so please welcome my very good friend, my GFF, one of my first GFFs, Miss Erin Smith of Gluten-Free Globetrotter.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
Hi. So everyone, if you don't know Erin, what I said, you will know later why I called her the OGs of the gluten. No, it's okay. I learned that from my teenage kids.
Yeah. It's true too. I can't deny it. So.
Yeah. So it's actually our topic for tonight is about celiac disease, or what we often called as gluten-free lifestyle. Because for the past 10 years or so, I said maybe 10 years, the gluten-free lifestyle has always, or the gluten-free diet has been very, very in. But most people don't realize that gluten-free diet is not just a fad diet. There are some instances that people actually really need to be gluten-free. So we have Erin here to tell us more about celiac disease, because May is actually Celiac Awareness Month, right?
Right.
So first off, guys, I want to let you know that we are live. So if you want to join us, don't forget, put it in the comment section, all your questions or even some of your stories, and we're more than happy to include you in our topic. Yes, you are included. If you are on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also like button if you want the topic. And make sure to just give us some likes and loves, because we love to hear from you. And don't forget, share this as well too if you have people who might be thinking of going gluten-free, who are finding tips on going gluten-free, or they've been gluten-free for a while and they still have any questions. Please share this video. So without further more intros, let's get on to our first question.
Sure.
So Erin, what is the difference between celiac disease and what they call like food allergies?
So celiac disease is actually an autoimmune disease. I think a lot of people get confused and think that we are allergic to gluten, but it's actually not a food allergy. It's an autoimmune response to gluten, which is found in wheat, barley, rye, and contaminated oats. So I think the biggest kind of misconception is that we are having an allergic reaction to gluten, but actually we're having an autoimmune reaction to gluten, and our insides are basically getting destroyed by gluten. So for people that are not diagnosed with celiac disease yet, they're basically their villi in their intestines are getting almost like beat up by the gluten. And oh, sorry, there's an echo.
It's me.
Okay. And so the over time, your body keeps on kind of putting up this immune response to gluten, and so you just get sicker and sicker. I think with food allergies, because I also have food allergies, but for food allergy, it's kind of like immediate and could be anaphylactic, as you know, with your kids. And but celiac disease is not an anaphylactic reaction to gluten; it's an autoimmune reaction to gluten. I know it's a little bit confusing, but there is like science behind why it's different. So, and with celiac disease, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but it kind of impacts the whole body. And traditionally, people thought it was just with GI symptoms or stomach issues or, vomiting, diarrhea, but it's systemic, so it can impact all of your body. And again, there's not like an immediate EpiPen or something that we can take to stop this reaction. You just basically have to get the gluten out of your system in as fast as possible in some cases, and sometimes it takes a really long time. So it's an interesting autoimmune disease that there's no pill right now. There's no pill, there's no vaccine, there's no medication, there's nothing. So as you said, it's gluten-free, and that's the only thing right now. So
okay, so speaking of the allergy and gluten, it's one of my pet peeves, I would say, as a food allergy mom, is to hear the word gluten allergy. Because the thing is, like, for us with food allergies, we know right away that I don't know. I will ask you your thoughts about it. But for me, it's like there's no such thing as gluten because we are tested depending on the food. Like my children, I know that's why they're in the gluten-free diet, the two of them, because they're allergic to wheat.
Right.
And then we really did, for the two of them, since they are allergic to wheat and they can't do the proper testing, which I think you would know later or you're going to discuss later. We became gluten-free for them because they can't be properly tested because they need to eat something, right? And that would be might be a cause of anaphylaxis for them. So anyway, what can you say about those who actually uses words? And for those who are actually like new to the gluten-free community, what are the words to watch out for?
So this comes up a lot, actually. And I think it's because if you're going out to eat or something, people don't understand what celiac disease means. People understand what a food allergy is. So, but I've even heard of dietitian, nutritionists saying, oh yeah, you're allergic to gluten. To my knowledge, there actually are very few people in this world that are allergic to gluten, which is a protein. So gluten is the protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. And so I know it's controversial because I get it. Like, we say allergy sometimes because that's the only way people will take us seriously. If we say, oh, I have to eat gluten-free, like, people roll their eyes and they're like, oh, okay, you're trying to lose weight, or you're keto, or you're paleo, or whatever. And like, you're trying to be trendy. And it's not the case at all. And I think, I think you were going with like the reaction, like, for me, I have a reaction in 30 minutes or less. Like, I know when I ingested gluten and I need a bathroom as soon as possible, or a bucket, like something, because I get violently ill. But it's like, so even though I'm not having an allergic reaction and I'm not anaphylactic, I'm still having a very severe reaction, and I need to not be where I am. But I do think that within the celiac community, and I'm guilty of it too, we've used the word allergy to get people to take us seriously, because it is that serious. Like, a cross-contamination and crumbs of gluten can make us as sick as eating a full slice of bread. So, a full slice of bread obviously will make me sicker, but even getting food fried in the same oil, like that contamination could make me very sick very quickly. And the only way sometimes a server will believe me is if I say allergy. So I am very aware of this as someone with food allergies, and now a food allergic mom myself. My son has food allergies. So I'm aware of my language, but I also want to eat safely. So I'm kind of like stuck in between.
Yeah, but actually for me, sometimes I just want to say, if you are already in the gluten-free community, just tell me if you're celiac, or you have gluten intolerance or sensitivity. What can you say about those words now?
Well, I will say, like, you're part of the community, and I think the food allergy, celiac community in general is really aware. It's everyone else that's not. But yeah, there is celiac disease, there is gluten sensitivity, there's non-celiac gluten sensitivity, there's gluten intolerance. So there's kind of this spectrum. But celiac disease, sometimes people will say, I have light celiac or mild celiac. There's no mild or light. Like, you have it or you don't have it.
Yes.
And I heard a good analogy once. It was like, you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, you either have celiac or you don't have celiac. And of course, you can start to feel better where you think, maybe I don't have it anymore. Or there's silent celiac where people never have any symptoms, but they have anemia or they have some other kind of low vitamin. B12 is a big thing. There's a lot of people with low B12, and it's because their body can't absorb the B12 because the gluten is damaging them on the inside. So there is this spectrum, but again, I think within our community, we're kind of lucky. Like, we all kind of understand that it exists, but it's like the others, that just don't get it, and they don't want to believe you when you say you need gluten-free for a medical reason, because there's so many people now eating gluten-free for a trendy reason. So, but then for someone like your kids that are wheat allergic, wheat falls into this gluten category. Yeah. So I don't know, because I've been gluten-free for so long, I don't know a lot about, like, is there cross-contamination with, if they ate rye bread, like, is it contaminated with wheat or something? So I don't really know the wheat allergy as much as I kind of know the gluten intolerance and the celiac disease. So
yeah. Actually, for them, because one of my children, before we found out about allergies, we went to a gastro before an allergist, and then the gastro asked him, because what are the signs? And at that time, he was actually, like, really excreting blood.
Yeah.
And it's weird. And at that time, he's like tiny. He's a tiny kid, and I would say genetically he's tiny, and he's also at that time around 4 years old. So his gastro said, that is not normal, but have you considered food allergies first? And I said, but he doesn't get hives. He's like, no, it could be. So, because he said, I don't want to do the endoscopy. Is it right? For a tiny kid first, if there are other things to consider, which I really appreciate, because he's like, he's so tiny, I don't want him to have trauma.
I know.
So at that time, and then we found out that he's allergic to a lot of things, so we removed it. But because of his wheat, the gastro already said, because he is very sensitive to wheat, we might consider, like, celiac. That's what, until now, he's what we call under observation for celiac,
right?
Because he can't do further testing until he maybe his numbers, or at least he outgrew his wheat allergy, because that is one thing, right? So maybe for those of you who are thinking, what are you talking about? So Erin, maybe you can share a little bit on how to, like, diagnose celiac disease.
Sure. So, and I know you asked me about my story too. So my diagnosis actually is still the gold standard, and I was diagnosed a very long time ago. I was diagnosed in 1981. So this summer is 40 years of living with celiac disease, which is kind of like when you say OG, like, I am old school, because not a lot of people in the United States were getting diagnosed then, or not a lot of children were getting diagnosed then, I should say. But basically the gold standard of getting a diagnosis of celiac disease is having an endoscopy, which is a camera down into your intestines, and then the doctor takes biopsies. So they take a biopsy of the villi in your intestine, and basically they look at, so to say, the health or the unhealth of your villi, and based on that, they can give you a diagnosis. So that's the gold standard. I know there's a lot of celiac centers in the United States that won't diagnose celiac any other way. Now there's also a blood test to test your TTG and IgA levels, which are your response levels to gluten. And so that didn't exist when I was a kid. There were no blood tests then. So, and actually when I was getting diagnosed, they were looking for a whole bunch of other things because they just didn't know what I had. And then, so there's a blood test now, but there's also a genetic test now, which can see if you have one of two genes, which is HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. And I only know this because we're considering getting my son genetically tested to see if he has the genes. But in order to get celiac, you have to have the gene, but then there's a trigger. So it could be some other illness that triggers, and it could be environmental. It could be a trauma to the body. So if the gene is present, there's something else that triggers the kind of the onset of celiac disease. So for me, I've actually never been genetically tested, but I am assuming I have the gene because now my sister has it, my nephew has it, my cousin has it, and I have it. So 4 people in our family have celiac disease. It's clearly hereditary. And I'm pretty sure the genes come from my dad's side of the family. So
blame it on the dad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just all of us are on that side. And so now with my son, I'm a little bit concerned. Like, does he have the gene? And if he does have the gene, like, we know what to look out for. We know if there's a trigger, down the line, and we don't have to go through the roundabout diagnosis. On average, it takes 6 to 10 years for someone to get a diagnosis of celiac disease. So I feel very lucky. It took my parents a year to get me, a little less than a year to get me diagnosed. And it was in the 80s, which is like crazy, like the fact that they were able to figure out what was wrong with me, I think is it says a lot about my doctor at the time. So
yeah, that's good. Because I know, like, even with my children, because when they had their food allergies, their first pediatrician, or actually their pediatrician before, didn't believe me because my kids are generally like healthy. We just go there just at least once a year because I consider them healthy, and then they don't get covered much in hives, which is a normal allergic reaction. But I said my son, when he gets it, or like I notice him having asthma attacks all the time, which I didn't know was already anaphylaxis. And I would put like an asthma, I would put an inhaler for him. And that's why when my allergist found out, he's like, are you kidding me? Because, there are some things that I didn't know that most people would just say, oh, it's just the hives. It's not the hives. It's actually internal swelling, something we don't see, which is also the same with celiac. We don't see it mostly outside.
Right. And that's why it takes so long for the diagnosis, because I was looking to see what the latest list of, and now there's like 300 symptoms of celiac disease, and it's different in everyone. It's different in me and my sister, and we're sisters. And so it's just like, there's so many ways celiac can attack the body and manifest itself. And it could be as like simple or as blind as like anemia, where you don't know why you're anemic, but that's actually why. Or it could be violently ill, throwing up. I mean, there's a laundry list of symptoms. And I mean, to your point, you don't necessarily have like a classic case of anaphylaxis or a classic case of celiac disease, because there's so many systemic things that happen with these issues.
So can you tell us more about your story?
Sure. It was many moons ago. No, so when I was about 2, I was very sick. I wasn't really growing. I kind of stopped growing, stunted growth, it's called. It's called failure to thrive and in children. And I just was very irritable, and I was having constant diarrhea, blood, as you said before. Like a lot of it was gastrointestinal, but it was also just like, I wasn't like a normal 2-year-old. I just wasn't really thriving. I wasn't growing. My eyes looked like, kind of like now, like I'm tired, but like now I have a 2-year-old, so I understand. like it was my parents said my personality really started to change. And so it was a lot of visits to the pediatrician. And then I got a pediatric gastroenterologist that just was like asking my parents a million questions. They thought maybe it was Giardia, which is a bacteria, I think.
Yeah.
And you can get that from traveling overseas. And they're like, well, she's never left New York, and so and then they were like, well, maybe it's cancer. So I was actually admitted into the hospital because I was so malnourished and I was so sick, and it was during the time, probably the spring of 1981, where they started doing these tests, and then they did the endoscopy, and that's when they realized. I say the summer of 81 because that's the first time I see it in my medical records because my mom kept everything. So so it actually says celiac DX, and it's like July 81, and it's from my pediatrician. So so I was diagnosed, and at that time the doctor said she has to be gluten-free, and my parents said, what does that mean? It wasn't even a buzzword in the 80s. So it was a lot of learning and trial by error, and basically like growing up learning how to be gluten-free in a gluten-filled world with no labeling laws, no gluten-free food on the shelves in the supermarket. I mean, it was a challenge, and it was definitely a learning lesson for everyone in my family, not just my parents, but like my cousins and my uncles and my aunts and my grandmas. And, so everyone had to learn what this was because nobody that we knew had celiac disease at the time. Mm-hmm. Nobody. I didn't meet another person with celiac until I was a teenager. So, wow. Figure the first 10 to 12 years of my life, I thought I was the only one in the world that had, and my parents, I mean, they're like, we don't know anybody,
Yeah, you don't call in the phone and said,
right,
my
and
child has this one.
Before the internet too. I mean, you couldn't just get online and like Google. It was just not a thing. There was no internet.
And I think also at that time, because I realized it too, with the food allergies, most parents don't talk about their sick child. You know, if something's wrong, it's not like, unlike before, like I would say in the rooms, or if you see another mom, oh, she's gluten-free because she has celiac. You will see moms talk in the parking lot about it. Yeah. But I think during our time, I would say our time because we're on the same age. Parents don't really talk. They would be saying things that are what they're proud of with their kids, but not what the kids are. And it's hard to be different at that time. So I bet they wouldn't be able. A part of them will like, I'm not sharing this to the whole world. Right?
Well, and also like to your point, and then like, people didn't really talk about allergies. I don't remember kids in my school having peanut allergies or having allergies. And if they did, it was like so secret. And to your point, and I think the only people who really knew when I was in elementary school were like the school nurse and my teacher. And that was it, because that's who needed to keep me safe. And then I had to really like kind of learn on my own that nobody was going to advocate for me except for me and my parents, obviously. But once you're in school, like you have to learn it on your own, especially in the 80s and the early 90s. Nobody talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is your story. Can you tell us about, I remember one time when you were talking about where you got your gluten-free stuff. You have to travel like by plane and get gluten-free items. Can you share with us that story?
You mean like my food now or back then?
Back then. Where do you get your food back then?
Yeah, back then was a challenge. There weren't a lot of companies that made gluten-free bread then. You couldn't walk into the supermarket, and there was no labeling. So my parents mail ordered from a company in Seattle, Washington called Energy Foods, which is still around today, and just ordered bread by the case. Like huge boxes would show up at our house by UPS. My mom bought a separate freezer, and it was just stocked with bread because couldn't get bread anywhere else. And I wanted to eat sandwiches. I was, in middle school, I wanted to eat sandwiches. So slowly, health food stores started becoming trendy. Whole Foods didn't even exist in the East Coast yet. So slowly we were able to get gluten-free items. And then once I joined a support group as a teenager, it was kind of word of mouth, like, oh, where can you buy bread, or where can you get gluten-free cupcakes, or, and then some restaurants, I grew up on Long Island, so some restaurants started offering gluten-free, and it was always because the owner had celiac too. So it was like never because gluten-free was in demand. It was mostly the owners wanted to be able to eat in their own restaurant. So I remember clearly going to a restaurant as a kid and thinking it was the best thing in the world to eat like pasta in a restaurant, but it was only because I remember the place is called Joanne's because Joanne, the owner, had celiac. So it was like she kept gluten-free pasta in the kitchen. So it was awesome. Like little things like that I remember as a kid. But then as I got older, once I went away to college, like it started becoming a little bit more known towards the late 90s, and there were more options. And, now I'm still amazed. Every time I go to those conferences where I see you, like, I'm amazed. There's a whole stadium filled with people who know what gluten-free is, because it wasn't like that. It was not like that. Even like 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. But 40 years ago, not at all. So
yeah, because I think just 10 years ago when when we're doing like the expos, I'm like, we don't have much people. And when we talk about gluten-free at that time, because since my kid is under observation for celiac, we kept everything gluten-free for them. So because and it's safer, because sometimes you can't even, it's hard to see an item that's labeled wheat-free. So might as well do the gluten-free, and at least we know we're covered for that part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there was an expo like many, many years ago, and it was the first time I had ever been in the place with like multiple people with celiac, and it just felt, it was like so comforting to me. Like, I'm not by myself here. It's not just me. And, it was super isolating. And even now when people are diagnosed, they still feel isolated. But I think there's an advantage now that there are products available. There is the internet, and so you have resources that are available that weren't available before. But I still am learning all the time about new products, about new technology and new treatments, and there's a lot of science coming out, but it's still 40 years later, the only way to treat celiac disease is to eat totally gluten-free. So that has been consistent over 40 years.
Yeah. So for those of you who are still wondering what is gluten-free, it is a diet that doesn't contain wheat, barley, rye, and what else?
And contaminated oats. So
and contaminated. Yeah. Okay, can you tell us more about the contaminated oats? Because many people are saying, "Why is she taking oats?"
Yeah. So oats. Yeah,
because now it's crazy.
Yeah. Oats is a whole controversy in itself. So I actually can't tolerate oats either, even if they're gluten-free. So there's gluten-free oats, which are oats there's two types. It's very confusing, but to be really quick, like there's purity protocol oats, which are oats grown in their own field, never contaminated with any other crops in the field, transported by themselves and then processed by themselves. So that's why they're called pure. And then there's mechanically sorted oats, which are oats that could be in contact with other grains, but then are mechanically sorted to sift out any grain that is not oat. The oats that are mechanically sorted can be labeled gluten-free if they're testing less than 20 parts per million of gluten. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because there's non-mechanically sorted oats that some people label as gluten-free if it's less than 20 parts per million. But in my mind, like, I have been told my entire life by doctors not to eat oats, because there was no such thing as pure oats when I was a kid. And so when I did introduce oats, I had a problem. So I actually avoid all oats, and I don't eat oat flour, nothing with oats, because I always have a reaction. There's a lot of back and forth within the celiac community is your reaction to oats because of gluten, or is it the protein within oats, which is called avenin? Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. I think there needs to be a lot more research, but I know when I eat oats, I have the same exact reaction as when I eat gluten. And these are gluten-free oats that I tried, and it's gluten-free oat products, like cookies that use gluten-free oat flour. But I have the same exact reaction, and I see no reason to eat that because I don't want to have that reaction, first of all. But also, like, it's hard to eat something where for 30 years the doctor was like, don't eat this. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, you can eat this. And I'm like, eh. And I tried, but it got me sick. My sister, on the other hand, eats gluten-free oats, and my nephew eats gluten-free oats, and they don't have a reaction like I do. So why? I don't know. But, you know, I think that I do think that over the next maybe 10 years, we'll see more, hopefully more research on oat protein of avenin compared to gluten, and like kind of if there is this comorbidity of having celiac and also having an oat intolerance, so to say.
Actually, speaking of oats, because my oldest, she outgrew all her allergies, and then which included wheat in it, and then, but we realized that even if she can eat wheat, if she eats it like 3 days in a row, like it's been a while, she would have like bad eczema. And I think that's why I was asking her, do you want to undergo, because the third one can't be tested yet, and I said maybe we should test you, because just in case you're positive for celiac, we know that they have the gene then, like. And then she said, what will I do? I said, you just have to eat gluten stuff. And then she Googled it, and she's like, they're not gonna put camera on me. That's what she said. So so she backed out on that. But but I'm thinking, because sometimes there are times that she's actually, because she could eat wheat sometimes, but not much in the house, because we don't really have much in the house. But I told her, like, every time we remove it, her eczema clears and everything. And one thing we realized is that she's also sensitive to oats, which didn't come out of her allergy testing and everything. Like, because with eczema, most of the creams that they use, they say, are oat based.
Yes.
The thing is, when she has anything oat based applied to her eczema, she would just flare up like crazy. So it's the weirdest part. That's why I told her, can you get tested? And she's like, I don't have the confidence yet to have that kind of testing. Because she actually watched something about how it is tested, and it scared her to death.
You know, it's interesting you say that about the oats and the cream, because I see that, it's in everything now. Well, it's in like all the Aveeno products. Everything has oats. And there have been studies that gluten cannot go through the skin. It has to be ingested to have a reaction. Yet I have a skin reaction if I use oat-based products. And I know many other people with celiac do. So I also think there is some component to the skin and celiac. I don't know, skin and gluten, and because I can't use oat products. And I've had people tell me, oh, it's something else. And I was like, okay, but oat is a thing I can't eat, and it's also a thing I can't put on my body. So maybe I do have an oat allergy, and that's something totally separate from celiac, but I can't use oat products. And actually, my pediatrician just told me to use something with oats on my son, and I'm very reluctant because I'm afraid, what if he has celiac and I'm like slathering oat all over him? And so we use it sparingly, and my husband puts it on him. So it was for like an eczema related kind of skin condition. So
but that's our experience, because until now she knows right away, like, because a lot of makeup now, or even those like skin creams, because she's a teenager, so she's using that, or even shampoo, anything, and it has they would say, okay, all organic, but then you're gonna have the oat in there. She would start itching after she use it. And
I have the same reaction to products with wheat in it. Like, I was using something on my face, and I was not feeling good. And then I realized there was like wheat protein. And, again, the science right now says that gluten can't go through the skin, but like, I know I wasn't eating the lotion, like something was getting inside of me, and I don't know how, but I would be very interested to see more research on the gluten passing through the skin, to be honest.
Yes, because actually that's the same way with when they said with allergies, but I realized like soy-based lotion, I can't use it to my kids who are allergic to soy.
Yeah.
Because they would just like they would say like it's really itchy, and I'm like it's not red, but then it will flare up
Yeah.
after a couple of days. And we got one comment here from the allergy dragon. I don't know if you know her. Hi, Martha. She said, "Hi, I can only tolerate a small amount of oats. My sister is fine with them as well." Yeah, because actually my daughter doesn't eat anything with oats as well.
Yeah.
Because she already know that she's gonna get itchy. But with the allergy testing, it's not there. Like it is not like it's not present. Technically, she's not allergic. She's not even sensitive because like the numbers. She doesn't even qualify for the sensitive. For something.
Yeah.
Okay. Which reminds me, can you share what common signs to watch out for? Because I know some parents would say, is my child has celiac or this one. So what are some of maybe top 10 signs to watch out for?
Yeah, and I actually I was looking this up before because there's so many things. I mean, a lot of people are diagnosed to start because of gastrointestinal. So for me, if I have gluten, I'm violently ill within 30 minutes, and I am throwing up, and and it's so a lot of gastrointestinal, and that was like the classical signs of celiac back in the day. It was all GI related. But there are hundreds, literally, there are 300 symptoms of celiac disease. For some people, they get diagnosed because they have a vitamin deficiency. For some women, they get diagnosed because they've had years of infertility and they don't know why. So untreated celiac disease can have a whole list. I'm going to look really on my cheat sheet here, but it could be anemia, it could be bloating, constipation, depression, anxiety, fatigue, brain fog is another thing they call it. It's like where it could be mouth sores, it could be dermatitis hepatiformis, which is the skin manifestation of celiac. So it could be itchy skin. So the list goes on and on and on. And it's just, that's why it's so hard to get a diagnosis sometimes, because you have all these symptoms or none of these symptoms, and it's just your vitamin levels, so to say. For me, I was kind of classic child where I was failure to thrive. I was having the GI issues. For my cousin who got diagnosed, it was all skin. She never had stomach issues. So from what I remember, it was more like eczema, and they thought it was psoriasis. They weren't quite sure. So, and then she ended up getting diagnosed with celiac. So it's this wide range of symptoms. But I would say, the majority of people that I know that have been diagnosed have had some kind of stomach issues. Either they stopped growing, or they lost a lot of weight really quickly, or they gained a lot of weight really quickly. So it's like your body kind of reacting to this autoimmune response to gluten, and it could really vary greatly. I know for me, I get really bad brain fog, I get headaches, I get joint pain. I didn't have that when I was a kid. When I was a kid, it was always stomach. So like my symptoms have even changed over the years if I eat gluten by mistake. I get way sicker now, but I think that's because I'm way more careful now, and I'm like, I have like no gluten in my body. Whereas as a teenager, I know I had gluten in my body because I made a lot of mistakes and just things we didn't know about back then. We didn't understand like cross-contamination back then because it wasn't really like in our vocabulary, and the doctor was like, as long as you're not eating gluten. And my dad's like, okay, well, here's cheese off pizza. Like, and I would eat it. And we just didn't know. Like it was the 80s and the early 90s. We just didn't really understand then. And like now I can't, like, I don't even really want to walk into a pizza place right now. Like I won't unless I know they're 100% gluten free. Like there's no reason for me to, because it's airborne and I'm like surrounded by gluten. I just don't want that. So
yeah, that's an interesting point, guys. If you have allergies or celiac, you can't just pick something out of
yeah,
food. Like, because I remember with my kids, I was like, okay, they're allergic to, yeah, like, okay, let's put a simple one. They're allergic to eggs. You know,
yeah,
like one, two of them are still allergic to eggs. So in a restaurant, you know, I think it's a Portuguese restaurant. They have the Portuguese steak,
mm-hmm.
right? But mostly it's often served. The egg is on top of the steak, right?
Right,
So I always tell them put the eggs on the side because they could eat the steak, and then because I know that we know when they cook the eggs, they have a separate pan
yeah,
for it, so I have no issues. And then sometimes when they make a mistake, I would say no. You know, when I get home, I'm like, oh, you know, a few times my husband said, oh, it's okay, we just remove the egg. No, the proteins are there
yeah,
already. You
right,
cannot just remove it or simply like remove the cheese and then you can add the cheese.
yeah. I think about it and it's like, and I've blogged about this a lot. Like we made a lot of mistakes because we didn't know any better. And there was nobody telling us this. The doctors didn't even know this then. Like it's come so far in kind of the education of the medical community. There's actually a really good article that just came out today by Dr. Tennyson, and she wrote about how we have to bring celiac awareness to the medical community because there's still so many doctors that don't know what it is. So, you know, it's like we not only are we educating our peers and educating ourselves, but we have to educate the medical community to be able to give us these diagnoses. So,
I know, right? And okay, here's one question that I know most viewers are thinking. Is celiac something that you develop, you know, just like an allergy that you could develop when you get as you get older, or it has to be there from the very start?
well, so you have one of the genes, to my knowledge, you have one of the genes to begin with, or both of the genes. And then there is a trigger to celiac disease. So whether it, like, for example, my sister had twins and she had a very high risk, stressful pregnancy. And then she just never was healing after her pregnancy, you know, once the twins were born. And so she was like going to the doctor. She's like, I'm sick all the time. I'm not getting any better. And then finally one day it just clicked. I was like, did you ever get tested for celiac disease? And she's like, no. But so her doctor thinks it was the pregnancy that actually triggered it, because it could be like a trauma to the body or it could be an illness.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, you know, years from now, if people got triggered by COVID, you know, and they didn't have celiac before, but then they had COVID and then they got diagnosed with celiac later. But yeah, you do have to have the gene present in order to get triggered for celiac disease. But there could be a variety of things. There was actually a woman in my support group many years ago that got mugged in New York, and it was so traumatic to her body. And then she started getting sick, and then she got diagnosed with celiac. But her doctor thinks that trauma and that like kind of post-traumatic stress was what triggered the celiac to kind of turn on, you know. And there's a lot of research coming out now of like what turns on the celiac, like why is it turned on for some people with the gene and not with others. But it's similar to, like, I hate to use this analogy, but like it's similar to cancer, right? You might have a gene that, you know, you're predestined or something, you know, for cancer, but you don't necessarily get the cancer. Something else triggers it, but you have that gene present. So it's the same with celiac disease. That the gene is present and then something else triggers it. Which is why I don't see a reason to get genetically tested myself, because I'm pretty sure I have the gene. Or both, and my sister, and like, but I just don't, you know, I've done enough testing in my life that I was like, I don't want another test. And in terms of celiac, like, I'm managing my celiac just fine. I don't have an issue with celiac disease itself because I'm not ingesting gluten, and knock wood, I'm pretty healthy. So
yeah. So that's a good point though, because I know, like, now, like, since more and more information about celiac is out, some kids who, like, I would say, have been eating wheat their whole life, those who are actually Italians, that they what, had their first meal
Yeah.
with pasta and bread and been eating it like every single day, every single meal. And then all of a sudden, like after what, at the age of 20, age of 15, you
Yeah.
suddenly say, my tummy hurts every time I eat this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's the point that we don't know what triggers. Maybe even puberty triggers it because there's so many
Totally.
changes in the
Yeah.
body.
Puberty. And I was going to say, like, even going away to college, like, I know a lot of kids now, like, as I'm older, that have gotten diagnosed once they're in school, but it's like a major life change like that can trigger it and just turn it on. And it's interesting to see some of the research coming out now about these kind of environmental versus medical triggers of the disease. And, I think we'll see more over time, like, is it where you live? Is it, I'm like fascinated if any of your kids get diagnosed, because when I was first diagnosed, it was like a very kind of like Eurocentric white disease. And so now I've seen people from around the world getting diagnosed.
Yeah.
And, and like, even 5 years ago, I never knew anyone from Asia with celiac. And the fact that like now these, people from Asia are getting diagnosed and that there's awareness is like very fascinating to me, because I think it just shows how maybe our diets have changed over time, environments has changed over time, the Western influence in Asia, and like, so I'm just like, you have to tell me if your kids ever have the endoscopy, because I really am like fascinated by it. I really like, I would love a doctor to do like a major like ethnicity and celiac study, because I think it's fascinating.
Actually, I wanted that. It's like right now, I just can't convince my first one to get that. But we do have one of the not allergy, the celiac. Is it? I think it's for the gene. It's the testing that it just
Okay.
asks for the blood, right? I think that one.
I think so. Yeah, we
So
haven't done the genetic testing yet, so.
So I might, ask her if, and then they just told me she has to be 18. And I said, that's in a couple of more
Oh, okay.
months.
Yeah.
So let's try that one first. And maybe, because I'm curious, because, see, blame it on the father, but my husband,
Yeah.
now their family's the one with allergies. Actually, my father-in-law was tested positive for food allergies when he was in his 60s.
Okay.
And one of them is actually wheat. So he was not tested for celiac. But,
Yeah.
they have the common things like eczema, asthma, and, like sensitivity to food.
Yeah.
And then my husband has it too. And then my two sister-in-law, like, what do you call it again? The dermatitis, something.
Yeah.
They have it. Yeah, they have it. So I
Yeah.
said, you know what? Can some of you get tested so that I would know? Because I said, from my side, I don't see any things in me. I would see any things in me if, the difference if I eat wheat, probably just because I eat a lot of, it's my binge food.
Yeah.
Like when I'm not with the kids. So I'm like, it's my binge food. So maybe I get bloated because I ate a lot and, my body's not used to it.
Yeah.
But I wanted that, testing to be done maybe soon, and I'll let you know once.
Yeah, no,
once
I'm
they
just very
agreed.
curious. And also like I was telling you, my husband's from Mexico, and nobody of his friends knew what celiac was when we first met each other. And so now a few of his friends' kids have been diagnosed with other things, whether it's like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and they have to go gluten-free now. But it just wasn't, maybe because of his background, it wasn't like a genetically predisposed, that's the word, for genetically predisposed. Yeah. So it just wasn't in the genes of his family, his ancestors, his friends, and whereas it's clearly in my family's genes. So
And one more thing that I'm interested in, because you know what, in Asia we eat a lot of rice base, which already is gluten free.
yeah.
So maybe because it doesn't get triggered because you eat rice or potatoes,
Yeah.
not much wheat,
Yeah.
right? So Probably
no,
that's
it
the
could
thing.
be. It could be. Yeah. I mean, it's the same, like I'm hearing about like obesity in China because of all the McDonald's that keep opening up over there, So it's like as different foods are introduced to your diets, then, does it change? You're changing the way you eat. Does it change how your body's reacting to that food? So,
We have so much studies. I love that, right?
yeah.
Now, let's have some tips for for those who are watching and who are already gluten free. What are your top 5 tips?
I think my biggest tip, and this is something I still struggle with, is like always read labels. And I know you know this,
Yes.
but things change, and gluten is not one of the top 9 allergens, because now there's 9, right, with sesame
For
and
me.
gluten. So gluten is not considered a top allergen. Wheat is. So, right? Am I? Yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Wheat
Okay.
is.
Sorry, like trying to remember count them. But so what happens is that sometimes brands change their recipe, and because it's not one of the top 9 allergens, they might introduce something like oat flour, and they don't have to really change their packaging, and it gets very confusing. So I've seen this, unfortunately, in a few popular brands over the past couple of years, where they are adding oats, and I learned the hard way, because all of a sudden a product that I used to eat all the time is now making me sick. So number one, read the label. Even if it's a product that you buy every single week, read the label, like without a doubt. Number two is, let's see. I mean, I guess with celiac disease, I would say, man, this is hard because I don't have like 5, I have like 500. But I would say, this isn't really a tip, but I would say, and maybe you can relate to this with food allergies in your family, like, don't be embarrassed. And I can say this as someone that was embarrassed for many, many years. I didn't want to talk about it because I was like, oh, they're going to think I'm picky. But at the end of the day, like, this is your health and your body. And so if you are embarrassed to advocate for your health, then you can really jeopardize your health. So I think you have to be able to speak up. You have to be able to ask questions. And you know what? Like, if you have to, I have these cards here, and they kind of explain celiac disease. But like, use these. These are a tool that can help you kind of start that conversation. They should not be your only tool, but I think using tools to help you kind of navigate that conversation, you should totally do that. So, and number 3, which is something I kind of live my life by, is like, don't let celiac stop you from living your life. Like, I got to this age, I've traveled the world, I've gotten married, I've had a baby. And like, if I had let celiac kind of hold me back, and I know it's easy to say for me because I've been celiac for so long and I see plenty of people that struggle, but like, your life isn't over when you get diagnosed with celiac disease. And I think that's really important. And I think that of, you and your kids and their food allergies is like, your life isn't over. It's just, you have to learn to live with it and not let it get the best of you, really, and I think that's been like my message since I started my blog so many years ago. It's just not to let it dictate your life in a negative way. Like, you need to control it, and it might take time, and it might take therapy, and it might take a lot of years, but like, you can live a very full and happy life with celiac disease. And maybe you're not well all the time. Let me tell you, I get sick. Like, I get really sick. And my last horrible experience, I was on vacation and I was pregnant, and it was terrible, and I was vomiting in the bathroom for 3 days straight, and it's not fun. And I'm a seasoned celiac, but it's like, it's still, I just don't want people to like become a hermit because they have celiac disease. It makes me sad. And I hope that I can like help one person kind of overcome that just by putting my story out there.
Mhm. Yeah, that is so nice. Because, yeah, that's what I always say. It's just one part of you
Yeah.
that, and there's more things. And I always say, you got the reason why you got it.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe right now you don't know why, but maybe like for my case, in my case, I started a blog. I became a food allergy advocate
Yeah.
because of food allergies. And I think on your part, your story, because we are more open and sharing it, we
Yeah.
might as well help one or two people. Like, you
Yeah.
could eat out, or you could, just what you said, you can go on vacation,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you
No,
can
for sure.
travel. You can
Yeah.
travel, right? So,
Yeah.
speaking of that one, I know you have I would say a travel blog as a
Yeah.
gluten free one. So, what are some of your tips to share when you're traveling and you have celiac disease?
Yeah. So my number one tip, without a doubt, is do your research before you go. Make it part of your itinerary planning. Like when you're figuring out, bless you, whoever sneezed, somebody sneezed. um,
It has.
but like when you know where you're going, start to do your research. So if you know, for example, you're going to Manila, like start doing your research and say, where can I eat? Where can I buy groceries? Where's the hospital, God forbid. And so whenever I'm putting together my own trip, I do all of that research as much as I can before I go and before I get there. Also, if I'm going to a hotel, I'll contact the hotel ahead of time and talk to them about the food at the hotel. If I'm flying, I'll request the gluten-free meal, but I still will always bring gluten-free food with me because I don't trust the airlines, So, but yeah, do your research ahead of time because at the end of the day, when you are on vacation, you want to be able to enjoy yourself and not have to worry about it. But then also bring backup food wherever you go. Like I always, to this day, bring food with me, not just because I have a toddler, but because for myself, I get hangry too.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even my bag too. Sometimes my kids are like, "Mom, we didn't bring food. Do you have something in your bag?"
And you do, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Even if they're what? My youngest is now 12. Yes, I do have
Yeah.
stuff in my
Yeah.
bag.
Yeah.
But that is so nice because I love it. Because I remember when we started with our food allergy journey, one of the things that I struggle most is actually going out because
Yeah.
you cannot
Yeah.
control that environment. But the thing is, I remembered what my their allergist told me before. You have to empower your kids
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
because if you don't, one day you're gone, they don't know how to
Yeah.
survive on their own. So the best
Yeah.
thing you could give them is to, let them know how to survive, know what to eat. Like even if they go to one restaurant, that they could be gluten free or they have allergies, tell them, when they order, don't order for them. Let them order and say,
Yeah.
can you change your gloves?
Yeah.
Because I have
Yeah.
allergies. That little thing, because usually, especially with teenagers, they would say, I don't want that because I feel like I'm a burden. And I said, you
Yeah.
know what? You have to ask them to change their gloves and
Yeah.
everything because
Yeah.
they know that they should be doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not a burden, it's a protocol. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's one thing it really took me a long time to become an advocate for myself. And now with my son having a peanut allergy, like I want to make him an advocate for himself when he can start speaking. I mean, he talks now. He talks a lot, but he doesn't understand. He just knows that he can't eat peanut, but he doesn't really understand the concept of peanut.
yeah.
We talk about it, and I try to tell him, but I think it's really important to like you said, have your kid explain it to the waiter, even if they're little, because
Yeah.
then they get comfortable with it, and it's just normal. I think as adults, we are very aware of what other people are going to think. Kids kind of don't have that sense of it. They just say whatever they want to say. And I see that with my nieces and my nephew. And so starting them out young to be that advocate is an empowerment. That's a great word. I think that I've seen kids that I've met in the celiac world now that are just miles ahead of where I was
Uh-huh.
even when I was in my 20s because they are empowered and they're smart and they are not embarrassed and they know it's their health at the end of the day that's going to benefit if they speak up.
Okay. So we got one question here, and it's interesting, and it's something too that I'm thinking. Most people eat, right now when it comes to healthy eating, they eat wheatgrass. Is wheatgrass gluten free?
So scientifically, the grass shouldn't have gluten in it. Personally, I don't consume anything that comes from a gluten plant, so to say. So I won't eat anything that's there are gluten removed beers, which are beers that are processed to remove the gluten. There are the oat products we talked about, but for me, I just don't consume anything that's a gluten-based plant, so to say. I do know people that consume wheatgrass, but for me personally, I don't want to. I don't see the risk. I don't see taking that risk, even though you can. Now, I don't know about a wheat allergy. If you probably can't have wheatgrass with the wheat allergy, right?
Actually, no, they don't say it. My kids don't like it because it's green. It's greens, and it's bitter anyway. They're like, no, I'd rather not eat. But they say the green because the protein is on the wheat itself.
That's and it's the protein. It's the gluten protein. Yeah, so that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like really hard to ingest something that comes from the same plant that makes me so sick. So I just don't see the reason to consume it. Yeah. But that's a good question. It comes up a lot, actually.
Yeah, because my kids are like, we're not eating, you know what they say? It's goat food. We're not eating goat food.
Yeah.
So that is really interesting. And then, do we have any questions? Okay, none so far. So if you have any questions, put it in. We're still waiting for you guys. So anyway, invite them to your blog and your social media.
My blog is glutenfreeglobetrotter.com. All one word. And then I'm on Instagram, same name, Gluten-Free Globetrotter. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me pretty much everywhere as Gluten-Free Globetrotter. I have an old blog that's still up. It's very old now. I haven't written on it in 3 years, but it's called Gluten-Free Fun. And that's glutenfreefun.blogspot.com. So I have a lot of archives there. I have my celiac story there, but it's not updated. Gluten-Free Globetrotter is really my main focus now. Soon, I hope now we could start traveling again, and really I can get back to my namesake because travel is my passion and I miss it desperately. But, hopefully later this summer I'll get to leave New York for the first. Actually, I went to Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago, and that was the first time I left my neighborhood in like 15 months. So,
oh, she's counting.
Yeah. Oh man. For me, it's like I used to be on a plane every single month for work, and so now, like that, I haven't been on a plane in a long time. It's sad. I miss it. It feels like a part of me is missing. So,
okay, we have one question here. Sure. Gluten-free diet is, they suggest a gluten-free diet to lose weight. But when I started gluten-free, I gained weight. Why?
So, as I like to tell people, a cookie is a cookie. Whether it has gluten or not, a cookie is a cookie. The thing with gluten-free food and bread and any kind of like processed gluten-free food is that they're trying to make up for the lack of gluten. So they either add more sugar or they add more fat, and they need to get like kind of this consistency and the ability of things to stick together. So a lot of gluten-free food is not healthier, and that's a misunderstanding. And there really is no science behind going gluten-free to lose weight. Now, I say that in going gluten-free and eating gluten-free packaged and processed food. If you're eating naturally gluten-free food, which is fruits and vegetables and nuts and eggs and proteins and naturally gluten-free food that is not bread,
cakes, cupcakes.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it does make a difference of what you're eating. So excuse me, gluten-free is popular has been popular for weight loss, but it's not necessarily going to make you lose weight. It's just not. So
Actually, I just thought of another story. They said they gained weight after being gluten free because their body is already healing.
Oh
Just like
yeah,
on your part.
totally. Yeah, and that's actually a good point. And I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but yeah, the when you are celiac and if you are malnourished and you're very skinny, your body is not absorbing any nutrients at all. Some people start to gain weight when they go gluten free because their body is actually getting healthy again. So like I know a few people with celiac that were on feeding tubes because they weren't absorbing anything. All their nutrients were just out the door, and because their body was rejecting all the food, and so they did gain weight. And so that is something to consider, is that as you heal, you maybe were skinny because you were really, really sick,
That's
you
it.
know? Yeah. And so yeah, I didn't mean to make a joke of that. I meant more like the people that are living gluten-free as a trendy lifestyle and not as a
No,
celiac. But yeah, I think to your point, as you heal, as you get healthy, as your body starts being able to absorb the nutrients and the vitamins, you might gain weight, you know. For me, it's like I'm just eating a box of gluten-free cookies, so it's I'm gaining weight because of that.
no,
So
actually, that's what I'm telling my kids. It's like, because one of my children, they have allergies, but one is fine, and then the other, he really can't gain weight. And I'm like, can you? And he would always tell me, Mom, are you shoving food on my face?
yeah,
And I said, but he could eat like tons of food. Maybe it's just because his metabolism is that
yeah,
one, or he's a teenage boy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I was like, if I'm just looking at the amount of food he consumes and he's still not gaining weight.
Well,
Where
and to that point, I have a friend that was like always eating pasta as a kid, right? Because it was like her mom was like, well, at least she'll eat pasta. But the pasta was just making her sicker and sicker. And so her mom's like, well, this should be fattening you up, you know, all these carbs. And it's like, in retrospect, she was so sick, she wasn't gaining weight because
weight.
she was eating poison, you know, like she was literally eating the food that was making her that sick and eating it every single day. I mean, think about how many kids eat like macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets and, you know, a lot of food that is very heavy in gluten and making them sicker. So
Yeah, just regular sandwiches, right?
yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, to me, like bread is comfort food. I want to eat toast, but like if I didn't know, I would have been eating gluten toast, you know? I mean, I know now, like, you know, my parents knew soon, but yeah, I mean, like when I get gluten, I want to eat gluten-free toast to make me feel better because it's comforting, right?
Yeah, me too. That's my cheat food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really nice. So, guys, if you have any questions, you can still put it in the comment section, even though we're almost close to cutting this live. So, if you're going to watch it on YouTube or Facebook, again, for a replay, you can put some comments. And you know what? I'm going to ask Erin to answer those questions.
Sure.
So, if we have them,
Yeah, for sure.
so we'll do that one. So thank you so much. I hope you learned a thing or two about celiac disease, about gluten-free living. And yes, I would like to again share Erin's message that you don't have to deprive yourself of other things just because you have celiac disease or you are living a gluten-free lifestyle. I would have to say it's a lifestyle because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really a
no, it is.
change.
It is. Yeah, it is a big change. So, but thank you for having me. It's good to see you. It's
Uh,
nice to see familiar faces over. We haven't seen each other in a while.
I
So,
know, right? I miss all those events.
I know, me too. Me too.
It's almost fall now. It should have been like those 2 years in a row, right?
I know.
Almost.
I
It's
know.
crazy. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And again, don't forget to join me next week on another episode of Getting Candid with Rochie. And if you have any suggestions for topics, just let me know in the comment section. Send me an email, send me a message in all my social media, and I'd love to get some guests to talk about that topic. And with that, I want to say thank you so much. Good night, New Jersey. Good night, California. And yes, still good morning in Manila. Bye.
Bye.